This was my very first time taking LSD. I have been an avid medical cannabis user for about 8 years now. At the time of the trip, I was an undiagnosed recreational user. I had tried shrooms a couple times in the past and had a lovely experience. I do not use tobacco, and I drink on occasion. 3 p.m., summertime, warm and sunny. I biked over to my friend's house. Pat gave me a giant chunk of strong toffee edible. I ate the whole thing, and I'm very used to functioning on edibles with a very high tolerance. I told her about my experience with shrooms, and she grinned at me, pulling out a little vial with a snowman on it. "I'm almost out," she said. "I'll fill this vial up with water and give it to you for free. Don't be mistaken, this is very strong, at least 7-8 hits, so be careful." She was wrong. Pat accidentally got a little bit of acid on her skin and asked that I leave before she gets too tripped out. Even though she wiped off the vial, a few minutes after touching it, my hand began to tingle. 5 p.m. My whole body was welling up with energy. Lights were brighter. I saw patterns on the sidewalk on my ride home. I stopped at the store to pick up some food and felt as though I was in my own little bubble away from everyone else as I moved through the store, searching for my goods. I'm not tripping yet. This is barely a microdose, mild open-eye visuals and changes in perceptions. 7 p.m. I arrive home with some super silver haze and my goodies. I prepare myself a pizza and head to my room. I showed my brother the treasure I found with a beaming smile on my face. I was so giddy to try LSD. My little brother did not warn me that he had his friend over and they were smoking in my room though. 8 p.m. After eating and taking a couple puffs of cannabis, I took the whole vial, thinking, "You can handle this." Big mistake. I will not romanticize this trip. Yes, it was a profound experience, but had I known what I was bargaining for, I would have thought twice and reduced the dosage. Pat was very wrong about the dosage. She later admitted it was close to 10 to 12 hits, although some trip reports where the person had consumed 30 tabs is closer to my experience. Immediately, I felt nauseous. I have a weak stomach in general and continue to smoke. I began to feel overwhelmed by smell, light, and sound, as if I were about to have a migraine. I asked my brother to turn down the War Pigs by Black Sabbath. He and his friends refused to do so and became belligerent at this point. I did not imagine this, and they often would act out, so I had to kick his friend out. No one is going to smoke my weed and disrespect me like that. 8:15 p.m. Within minutes, my entire visual field was covered with swirls, patterns, and bright flashing lights. The carpet in my room expanded. My room became huge and then disappeared entirely. I was in a cave of visuals, swirls, patterns, and lights, and the music sounded far away like I was in a tunnel. I could no longer function. I could no longer remember anything, and I even forgot I took the LSD. I accidentally drank bong water, thinking it was a bottle of sparkling water. After this, I remember becoming extremely hot and taking my clothes off. I had a very bad headache, and a voice in my head said some unsettling things. Specifically, "My body is attacking itself." I decided to lay down and try to sleep it off. This was another mistake. I thought I went to sleep. I was very convinced I was sleeping in my bed, but in reality, I went unconscious. My sense of self was asleep, but my body was still moving and acting on its own. The rest of this trip is pieces of memories that slowly came back to me and bits that other people had to fill in for me. As I stated above, myself went to sleep, but my body kept moving. I think this may have been a psychotic break. I became very afraid of my house. I think it was due to bad memories or the fact that a lot of people have died and suffered here. You could feel it in the walls. While still naked, I ran outside of my friend's house and started banging on the door, screaming her name. I laid down on their porch, looking up at the stars. The whole world was moving and shifting. creating cliffs and breaks in my once flat city neighborhood. The earth was splitting apart. I could see giant cracks filled with nothing but dark, empty space. The earth was shattered. My friend's dad came outside, and I ran away from him, stumbling a couple times. My brother tries to get me back inside the house, but I refuse, screaming, "I hate this fucking place! I'm not going in there!" I started saying awful things about my neighbor, like he was beating his wife, when in reality, he's a really nice guy, always cool and friendly. The police were called, of course. I was very lucky they didn't beat my ass. The detective, unfortunately, was the same detective who was there the day my father died. I felt very uncomfortable and tried to run away again, but was caught in a blanket by another cop. Sitting on my lawn, I looked up at the cop and tried to grab his dick. He dodged me, then I immediately said, "I'm sorry, officer," like a mad woman. Looking back, I'm so sorry for what I did to you, officer. I did not mean it, and I'm very ashamed for assaulting you. An ambulance came, and the paramedic looked like a fat old version of a woman I disliked. I again tried to run, but she grabbed me by my hair and yanked me into the ambulance. I started talking shit to them and the nurses, saying things I would normally never say had I been sober. We arrive at the hospital. They inserted a catheter in me that later became infected. I was restrained so hard that after I woke up, my pinky was purple from lack of blood flow and had no feeling. I said horrible, awful, hurtful things to the nurses who laughed it off but also instigated at the same time. I'm gone again. The staff became malicious and threw me into a blender. I felt the blades chop me up, starting from my right leg. The whole room goes red like the sun. I'm pretty sure I'm dead at this point. Then I hear a voice talking to me.
"This isn't where you are supposed to be right now. Pick your guitar up and keep playing. You'll get good. If you die now, how are you going to do that?"
I'm pretty sure this is God. Whatever this being was, it knew me, and all too well.
"What about your grandpa? What about your brother? And what about your mom?"
After God said this, I began to see flashbacks of memories. Past, present, and future began to meld together. I saw everything. God said I'll get a second chance and to be kinder to the people in my life. I received words of encouragement, and then after the last memory of my grandpa and signing off on this deal, I returned. I woke up, or my sense of self did. I was in a white room. I was 100% sure that this was purgatory. An Asian man, wearing all white, stood in front of me, looking as wise as Buddha. He asked, "How are you feeling? Are you awake?" "Where am I?" I asked. "You're at Resurrection Hospital." I had no idea where I was or how I got there. How did I end up a mile from home? What are clothes? Where are my clothes? The nurse proceeded to give me some food and water and encouraged me to stay away from drugs. Not likely, but I thanked him and apologized for how I acted. I was still tripping, but at least conscious. The walls were still covered in sacred geometry. My mom picked me up and took me home, grilling me over where I got the acid from. I wouldn't have called this a bad trip. The experience itself, while terrifying, was still breathtaking and mind-warping. However, this is a bad trip because I had unintentionally hurt people in the process because I lost control of myself, and that's my only regret. I still enjoy LSD occasionally, but I'm very careful about my dosage, environment, and make sure to have multiple sitters to prevent any mishaps. I so truly wish I could enjoy the substance in a medical setting where it would be safer, but that's not going to happen anytime soon. The last thing I'll say is remember the beginning of my trip where a voice told me, "Your body is attacking itself?" It turns out I have an autoimmune disease, 3 of them. During that trip, I believe I had a Graves' disease flare-up that possibly contributed to my actions and adverse effects. It may sound crazy, but the voice was right. I always learn something new when I take LSD. It's true that psychedelics provide valuable insight. If I never heard that voice, I would have never taken the steps needed to get my AI disease diagnosed and under control. In a way, this trip did save me. From last year, around August, to the time of the incident, February maybe, I was really into LSD. I had a very reliable supplier. It was always the real stuff. Never bought a hit or two at a time. I would usually get a strip or two. Of course, not all for me. For the entire time period, I dropped maybe once every 2 weeks. I'd do anywhere from 3 to 5, greatly enjoying it. Nothing bad ever happened. One night after work, I went to X's house. I'd gotten the strip of some good microdot. I was a little worn out, so I didn't want to do the normal amount. Keep in mind, I've dropped at least a few hundred times. So I decided to do 2, just to chill out and have fun and experience the experience, you know? So, I dropped 2 and he dropped 3, around 11 or so, the normal time I drop. I'm a night tripper, and I've never been a fan of day tripping because every time I trip in public, I feel like everyone's laughing at me for some reason. About an hour in, it started. Everything was going as it usually does with LSD, slow melting movements, laughing hysterically, the normal. We decided to watch some Dragon Ball Z for a few hours, smoke some bud, do the normal. But then things got dark, fast. I disconnected from the TV show and just started exploring my mind. Then something happened. I'll never be able to explain this. Please, from here on out, keep your mind open to what happened, no matter how crazy I'm about to sound. This happened. From my perspective, none of this is fictional. This was all too real to me and to X. It was around 1 or 2 a.m. The trip stopped. No come down. No falling asleep. It just stopped. The movement stopped. I felt sober. I felt like myself. I wasn't disoriented. We both looked at each other in complete confusion. What happened? We both asked that. I just went along with it and said, "Well, that was a nice trip, man. I'm gonna go to the restroom." I go upstairs and the trip was just over. Just like that. But as I went back downstairs, here begins the horror. I was sitting on the couch and he said, "I have something to show you." He plays an episode of Dragon Ball Z. It began, and it glitched out kind of. The title screen said the episode was called Mistakes of Last Night. I was utterly confused. He looked at me as if he knew something I didn't know. The episode played, and full force, I was flung back into the trip, like I'd been punched with a psychedelic fist of intense power. The episode included a fight between Frieza and Goku. That night, I was being tested. Something else was with us. Something evil. Something communicating through the TV, Dragon Ball Z, and controlling X. X wasn't himself. The whole time, I felt like he was in on it. Of course, the entity couldn't cause physical harm to me, so perhaps he used a host. This guy is about 200 or 300 pounds more than me. He is a big guy. I got up to go get some water. I was nervous and very scared. He was in my way and asked where I was going. I didn't answer, and he looked like he was going to hit me, so I put up my fists, just in case, so I could defend myself. He swung at me, knocking me on my bed. He then got on top of me and started to beat the fuck out of me. He got up and apologized. I apologized as well. I decided to stay down there with him. Then came the tests. In Dragon Ball Z, Goku represented life, Frieza represented death. The clock read 4 a.m. Every time I would make a mistake, everything would replay. The episode would go backwards. Me and him would both go in reverse, and the clock would reset to 4. I know, ridiculous. Just keep hearing me out. Every time my will to live fell short, Frieza would get the upper hand on Goku, and X would freak out and continue to hurt me. I was being tested. I was being punished. I let out all of my emotions and started crying deeply. He got really emotional, and I hugged him, and he said it was okay. Everything will be okay. Some blurry things happen. I don't recall it, but I had to endure every bad feeling. The test was to endure it and prove that I had the will to survive. I threw up on his carpet, so I went to clean it up. Out of courtesy, I went to go to his laundry room inside of his basement where we were to go wash it. I get in there and he starts pounding on the door. The door slams open and he's grabbing me, pulling me back, punching me, my blood all over the wash dial for the washing machine. He threw me down and started to choke me with a pillow. I slowly slipped away, but I had to live. I had to prove to this entity that I wanted my life. In my mind, I could hear him mocking me, the entity telling me I am unworthy of my life. I was suffocated, punched relentlessly, had the air sucked out of me, had intense pressure build up inside. I was about as close to death as you can get without dying. I was screaming, "He's trying to kill me, help!" at the top of my lungs, over and over. Finally, I got up and I broke his pipe that was in there to defend myself against him. Finally, I slipped free of his grip. I walked out into the basement room, lost all of my energy, and fainted. I then began to go into a seizure, every part of my body shaking violently without control. Next thing I know, I woke up in the ambulance. They told me if they hadn't gotten there sooner, I would have died from blood loss. They estimated that I had a good 15 minutes until I could have lost my life. I was there. I was at the edge. I slipped away momentarily while being choked on the floor, reaching for something to grab, something to just help me get a breath of air. There are some details that I left out because I'm not sure when it happened on the timeline. I spilled a full cup of water on myself. The entity told me I had to go through complete embarrassment. I had to prove I could live. I got completely naked. Why? For the above reason, to learn a lesson. I cried and cried, yelling everything I regret in life. I haven't touched LSD since. I never will, ever. Thank you for reading. It was really hard typing this out. I am a friend of the person who was in this particular experience. He has told me exactly what to write, and I will write from his first-person perspective. This story takes place in Atlanta, and I am 18 years old. I had done LSD several times before this occurrence. Each time had been the most pleasing of experiences. I had ventured through my thoughts, and each time came out happily, seemingly on top of the world. Little did I know, my next trip would not be so beautiful. It was a Friday night. That week at school, I had done poorly on a couple of tests, and when my parents found out, they gave me hell. They called me stupid and threatened to send me to military school. You know, all that bullshit. I had also been having problems with my girlfriend. She found out that I had been doing drugs. I had not informed her, as she was not particularly fond of them. I tried to reason with her, but she would not have it. Our relationship continued to deteriorate until finally we broke up on the Thursday prior. Well, back to Friday night. I obviously had not been feeling too happy, so I decided to meet up with a few friends as a sort of pick-me-up. I met 3 of my friends at the movie theater, and one of them told me they had scored some LSD. One of the main rules of tripping is to always think good thoughts and be happy prior to your trip. This was where I made my mistake. I was incredibly depressed, but I decided to just fuck it and down 9 gel tabs. My friends also had some, and I'm not sure how much. We decided to go out to my friend's car before the movie and smoke a few bowls. I had 4. We then proceeded to see The Ring. Huge fucking mistake. God damn, I was a dumbass for seeing that movie while tripping. Everything started out normal before the movie started. I was watching previews, and the colors on the screen swirled and twisted in shape. They were so beautiful. I was sure this was going to be a pleasant trip. I would be brought out of my depression. Haha, wow, was I fucking wrong. So the movie started, and immediately I am transported to a world of fear and horror. If you have seen The Ring, then you know the part where you see the girl in the closet and her horribly contorted face. When I saw that, my friends and I completely lost it. We sprinted out of the theater screaming. I'm pretty sure I was crying. I'd never seen anything scarier in my life. But because I was tripping, I kept seeing the image over and over again, as if the girl was right next to me. We luckily spotted another one of our friends. He was sober that night. We told him what was going on, and he was nice enough to drive us to our friend's house, as we were obviously incapable. I looked out the window, and I saw shadows instantly twist shape and turn into perverse face demons. One shadow looked like fingers, and it turned into an arm that reached out and attempted to grab me and pull me down to hell. This arm had a voice, a deep, mysterious, terrifying voice, almost like the one of Indrid Cold from the Mothman prophecies. I pissed my pants because I was so scared. We finally arrived home. I felt as if this feeling would never go away as we walked into my friend's basement. It was extremely dark down there, and in the corner of my eye, I kept seeing a terrifying, demented, evil face staring its deranged, menacing eyes into mine. My friends had kind of cooled down, but not me. We decided to smoke some more bowls to lift our moods. When it was my turn, I lit the Zippo and I saw the flame, twisting and twirling right in front of me. I was perplexed by it. I had never seen anything more interesting in my life. But out of nowhere, all of a sudden, the flame just exploded in my eyes and was the length of the room. I then saw dark figures crawling out of the flame, obviously coming to take me away. I sat there, quivering in fear. My hands were shaking so hard that I dropped the Zippo and it fell on my leg. I sat there and saw it burning a hole through my pants and burning my leg, but I could not feel it. Luckily, my friend noticed what was going on and knocked the Zippo off of my leg, and my other friend picked it up and started to stare at it in a pleasurable wonder. I wished I could have felt that way. I started to cry, just all out cry. Why were my friends so much better off than me? Why the fuck does God hate me? I then started to scream, just screaming my lungs out. My friend came over and pulled his hand back and slapped me vigorously across the face. I watched the motion of his hand, and it seemed like 50 hands were coming across and slapping me, one by one. I had to retaliate. I took the lamp off the table next to me and threw it at his head. The glass lamp shattered across his face, and he slumped to the floor. The light had singed his hair, and his face was dripping with blood. It made me happy to see him in pain, to see somebody else going through the same thing I was. My two other friends weren't even watching as I got on top of my nearly unconscious friend and started beating him senseless with anything I could find. Thankfully, his parents sprinted down the basement stairs and saw what happened. They stopped me from potentially and unknowingly killing my friend. My two other friends had no idea what was going on because they were over in the other corners of the dark room tripping hard. The boy's parents flicked on the lights, and I was blinded by it. I jumped off the boy and started to sprint out the door, where I jumped through a window thinking I was a hawk. Of course, we were in the basement, so I luckily just landed on the ground in front of me. The boy's parents called 911. All of us were taken to the hospital. We had mostly come down from the trip by now. My friend was lying unconscious, barely alive. I had just now realized what I had done. I just had a broken left arm and some deep cuts from jumping through the window, but nothing like my friend's wounds. The rest of us were taken to the police station for questioning. I admitted to ingesting the LSD, but not to beating my friend. My friends admitted to nothing and wound up getting out scot-free. Fuckers. But I was charged with assault and battering, and I had some gel tabs in my pocket, so they charged me with drug possession too. I have been charged as an adult, so I'm currently in jail. I'm going to court soon, where they will ultimately find me out. They already told me they know I'm guilty. I have no case. I am fucked. Royally fucked. I am still suffering from psychological trauma. LSD has taken my life down the tubes, but it's really my own fault. I hope, somehow, I get the death sentence, because death would be way better than this lifestyle. The moral of the story is, don't fuck up. Don't trip when you are depressed, and always trip with somebody sober. I didn't listen to the advice I read on the internet, and now look at me. Please, give me your prayers.